Hello everyone, it has been 1 year since the Reno Reset. For those who are unfamiliar, I already made a video about it last year, shortly after it happened, so check that out. If you want a more thorough explanation though, the short version is that the Reno Reset was a parliamentary coup d'etat at the 2022 Libertarian Party National Convention in Reno, Nevada, where the Mises Caucus swept the national leadership elections. I supported the Reno Reset because I believed that the Libertarian Party of that time was not at all consistent with its namesake, and was an embarrassment to the broader libertarian movement, as I argued in last year's video. Now that it has been a year since this change has occurred, I would like to share my thoughts on the results of said Reno Reset, as well as some of the challenges I believe still exist, as well as a few new ones. The ideological direction of the LP has changed, mostly for the better. The profound victory of the Reno Reset shouldn't cause complacency, however, for reasons I will elaborate on in this video. First, I would like to bring up the fact that the Reno Reset isn't truly over. Yes, the Mises Caucus has taken control of the national leadership, but there are still some state chapters that are compromised, albeit not the majority. The Reno Reset caused some state chapters which were loyal to the prior regime to disaffiliate from the national organization. The Massachusetts, Virginia, and New Mexico state parties have formed an organization called the Association of Liberty State Parties. Due to internal disputes, there are two libertarian parties in these states, with the Libertarian Party of Virginia and Libertarian Party of Massachusetts being the nationally recognized parties, and the Classical Liberal Party of Virginia and the Libertarian Association of Massachusetts being the non-nationally recognized chapters. This is likely in part due to a legal dispute between the national LP and said chapters over the named Libertarian Party, though I am not going too far into the weeds in this video on that matter. What is a far greater threat to the progress of the Mises Caucus is actually the Classical Liberal Caucus, which was founded in 2021 in response to the growing influence of the Mises Caucus. The Classical Liberal Caucus was founded by former regime libertarians and their sympathizers with the intent staging a parliamentary coup similar to the one the Mises Caucus did last year. While Classical Liberal Caucus Chairman Jonathan Casey or any of the other caucus leadership has not directly stated this tweet from the chairman leaves little doubt as to their intentions. But wait, what is with all the infighting? How does any of this matter? Some of you will ask, and it is like I said in my prior video, the Reno Reset was necessary to purge the Libertarian Party of woke cultists, and as I will show you in the following screenshots and other evidence, the concerned trolls at the so-called Classical Liberal Caucus and other bad actors are like the prior regime, a bunch of woke cultists that plan on reintroducing cultural Marxist identity politics into the LP to cure it from what they argue is a bigotry problem. Instead of addressing criticism honestly, they instead often result to red herring, poisoning the well, and false equivalence fallacies along with a hefty dose of whataboutism. As we see from this retweet from the Classical Liberal Caucus, concerns over identity politics apparently equals being MAGA, and the obvious implication here is that being MAGA means being white supremacist, even though white supremacy has been on life support since the 80s. This next tweet from the Texas chapter of the CLC is in reference to the Allen, Texas mall shooting, which was allegedly done by a Mexican Nazi, which makes about as little sense as it sounds, which makes the suspicion of being a false flag a rather reasonable one. But again, if you ask questions or point out how an event like this, even if the official story is true, can be used in a nefarious manner, you must be a racist. In this political cartoon we see posted by the Texas CLC comparing people that criticize the woke cult with racists and homophobes of the past. This last one I will show, however, is the most blatantly dishonest. While I have seen many wood chipper memes and references in regard to people that support some of the more unsavory aspects of the current LGBT movement, I am yet to see any of those statements directed towards any LBGT identifying youth. The Classical Liberal Caucus has criticized the Mises Caucus for being unprofessional and inappropriate, yet they support these shameful lies. While we are still on the subject of LGBT and its more unsavory aspects, their virtue signaling on these matters is just as the Democratic Party. In this rather delusional meme that blatantly ignores biology, because fuck that, right? We clearly remove any distinction between biological women and trans women. The fact that this comes from a supposed libertarian makes it almost as cringeworthy as now Justice Jackson's infamous "I don't know, I am not a biologist" response to being asked what a woman is. I have nothing against trans people and support the right of consenting adults to identify how they wish, but biological reality doesn't care about personal feelings. In this next one, we clearly see blatant fear-mongering through the implication that some states in question are supporting violence against trans people when the laws in question almost entirely deal with child drag shows and children being transitioned. This next one is from 2022 Libertarian Party nominee for Georgia U.S. Senate seat, Chase Oliver, who I liked at first until I found out about his allegiance to the woke cult. I don't know what supposed Nazis he is referring to outside of gay bars, but his implication that this is ubiquitous is yet even more irresponsible fear-mongering. If they're really Nazis in whatever incident he is referencing here, please feel free to provide evidence in the comments. But with how often I have heard the word Nazi be used, you can pardon me for being a bit skeptical. This next one argues that children can consent to literally anything, despite neurological studies proving otherwise. If taken at face value, a child can consent not only to being put on hormones and having their genitals removed, but can also consent to smoking, drinking, and having sex with adults. I am curious what kinds of things are on his hard drive. This is the last one about LGBT issues in this video, I promise. This one gaslights us into thinking that drag shows are not much different than the comedic uses of drag like you see here. When sane people say that drag is inherently sexual, we are not referring to comedic contexts like this or numerous examples that exist in popular culture, but the obviously sexual context and intent in drag queen story hours and drag shows. Taking a child to a drag show to teach them to respect LGBT people is like taking a child to a strip show to teach them to respect women. It is child abuse justified via absurdity. Speaking of absurdity, does anybody know exactly what the point of this meme is? Saying, yes, I am the establishment shill sounds like a huge cell phone to me. Seriously, what is this? One of the most base changes the Reno Reset made was its avocation of national divorce, but these pinheads have criticized it in the most brain-dead ways imaginable. Yes, I would to eliminate statism, of course, but simple reality dictates that the closer to the people a government is, the easier it is to rein in. I keep explaining to these clowns that national divorce is a mere means to an end, not an end in and of itself. In this next one, we see the connections of secession to the Confederacy, which is a tired cliche constantly shit out by leftists. This completely ignores the fact that nullification wasn't just a Southern thing. Some northern states actually nullified the Fugitive Slave Act, a fact they don't teach in schools and one that these historical illiterates are probably completely clueless about. We see the historical illiteracy in this one as well. Don't get me wrong, slavery was easily one of the main motivations for creating the Confederacy. There were, however, also disagreements over taxes and tariffs, and the Union's goal in bringing the South back by force was not due to humanitarian concerns over slavery. It was because the South seceding was a threat to their political power. The Emancipation Proclamation didn't end slavery, the 13th Amendment did. The purpose of the Emancipation Proclamation was as a war measure to economically cripple the rebel states, and it did not apply to the border states, which for those not in the know, were slave states that remained in the Union. This next one sounds reasonable at first glance, but the problem with it is with the term states' rights itself. What is usually meant is state sovereignty, and the purpose of which is to limit the size and scope of government, to prevent our constitutional republic from becoming tyrannical. Under our federalist system, the federal government and the states are supposed to check and balance the other. The states can perform functions that fall outside the federal government's enumerated powers, and the federal government can step in when states threaten the rights of their citizens. The centralization of government power has upset this balance, and an Article 5 convention or quite possibly even national divorce may be necessary to fix this. I would prefer an Article 5 convention be called first and national divorce only be done if that doesn't work, but if national divorce is what it takes to restore liberty, then so be it. This next one is the most naive and childish screenshot I have taken out of all of them. As a libertarian, I indeed want the entire world to be free, but the problem is not everyone in the world wants to be free. I have often heard people say that most people are libertarian but just don't know it, and I once believed that. But seeing the irrational cult-like mentality of so many statists has made me no longer believe this. Don't get me wrong, there are people who really do fit this description, but it is not the overwhelming majority that this belief makes it out to be. Rousseau was wrong. You can't force people to be free, and attempting to do so is tyrannical. The best you can do is secure for yourself and those you care about and try to be an example to those that there is a better way. This childlike naivete also extends to foreign policy. with many of these clowns recycling neocon talking points from the early 2000s to justify World War III. This has extended to gaslighting those of us that think it is a bad idea to get involved in a Russia-Ukraine border dispute that is none of our business by saying they are the real anti-war voices, because we have to get involved otherwise we are in bed with Putin, apparently. In this example in particular, they used a nonpartisan anti-war rally, which the LP was heavily involved in. At this rally, there were communists and other leftists who took part in addition to libertarians and non-interventionist conservatives. They have openly accused the LP of hypocrisy for daring to have a single-issue coalition to prevent nuclear annihilation, which conveniently ignores the vast difference between a coalition like that and allowed woke cultists directly inside the LP. I even had one fakertarian Einstein accuse me of being a coward on Twitter over this, and eventually got triggered enough to block me. Speaking of being blocked, I was also blocked in a separate incident by the Louisiana State LP by calling them out of their pedo bullshit by advocating for a Reno Reset for their state chapter. I must have really hit a nerve to piss them off that much. Of course, the feeling is mutual, as this classic demonstrates. Anti-vax is a buzzword at this point. While it is possible to be pro-vax yet anti-mandate, there are some so-called libertarians that have argued in favor of mandates, with some even going as far to say that not taking one is equivalent to violating the NAP. If it wasn't for all the other duplicitous takes, I would perhaps give a bit more of the benefit of the doubt, but no. As for this next one, I fail to see how they are a triumph of capitalism if they have this illegitimate protectionism granted to them via the Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986 that grants near universal immunity from liability against these companies. This is plain and simple corporatism, not capitalism. But wait, some of you may say, isn't the LP hemorrhaging money and membership since the Mises Caucus takeover? There are problems in that regard, but it is not quite as dire as they make it out to be, though that point will be further explored in part 2 of this video.